Welcome to the Hirshberg Entrepreneurship Institute's webinar series, Yes We Can, Perspectives and Strategies for Success in 2021. We will begin the webinar in about 5 minutes. Thank you for joining us. We will start the webinar in about 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us. We will start the webinar in about 1 minute. Thank you for joining us. In this webinar, we will be utilizing the chat and the Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to ask questions of our panelists, please put it in the Q&A. When you click on the button on the bottom, a window will pop up. Type your question on the bottom of the window and hit send. Your question will go to our panelists and they'll either answer it online or on the air, or they'll make sure that they get an answer for you. We will be using the chat, but that's mostly if you have any technical issues or you'd like to share any information to the other attendees. But if you have questions for your panelists, please use the Q&A. And now, before we get started, we'd like to ask some questions about you. And so we have some questions here. The first one being, let us know if you're a vendor, a brand, a broker, distributor, or some other role. Go ahead, don't be shy. We also have some other questions. If you have product, what categories are you in? And if you have any product certifications, you can indicate what those are, or some that you're working towards. Just let us know. You might have more than one. And then finally, do you create your products in a private kitchen? Do you use a co-packer? And also, do you work with a broker, or are you in distribution nationally or regionally, or not at all? Great. It looks like a lot of you are voting. Just keep on answering those questions there. It'd be great for us to know a little bit about you. Okay. And I will share those results with you. It looks like a lot of you do a lot of shelf stable, a lot of non-GMO verified, using co-packers, working with brokers, and in national distribution. And with that, thanks again for joining us. And I'd like to introduce Gary Hirschberg.
Great, and thanks for keeping those results up, Carlene, because there's a few extra questions and it's good to for the panelists to just absorb. So just to underscore, there's about almost 200 of us on right now. Of those who answered, 2/3 are in national distribution. That's significant. About 2/3 are working with brokers. Interesting. 40% are not, and that's actually quite interesting. I'm sure we'll get to that. The majority of you are co-packing. That's something I haven't seen, although I suppose if we add other and private kitchen, maybe that's but nonetheless. Healthy percentage of organic, non-GMO verified, and then as you can see right at the beginning, pretty well distributed across categories here. I guess shelf stable grocery, particularly if you add chips, snacks, candy, gets a little bit of the nod. Frozen, not a good day to talk about frozen for much of our country. And then of course you guys can see 3/4 of the folks on here are vendors or brands, which is very helpful to know. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for filling in the questionnaire. And I'm really delighted to have this great panel of returnees today. This is our 5th webinar in this series, and the attendance keeps growing. I will say it at the end, but I do want to underscore, we really value your feedback. So, there's an evaluation form and a link at the end. Please use it. Particularly help us identify topics that are meaningful, things you'd like to go into greater depth about, or things that could be useful that we haven't thought of if you look at the rest of the agenda. Next week, we will have a webinar on telling your story and gaining discovery in the new post-COVID world. So I know gaining discovery is an enormous question. Probably one other thing we should have asked in our questionnaire, now that I'm thinking of it, but I think we can make some assumptions, is the longevity of a lot of the businesses here. And I'm certain that about half are in the early stages, perhaps more. Maybe, Carlene, let's remember to ask that question next week. But the point is that for all of us, discovery, innovation, it came up last week with UNFI, and it's certainly going to come up today, are big questions on our minds. So today I'm really excited. Pat and Ben, and of course Elliot have been with us before. My co-moderator is Elliot Begoun, who I think everybody by now knows. Elliot led our second webinar, and as the co-founder and principal of TIG Brands, Elliot spends a lot of time helping early stage companies nurse themselves through those troubling waters, which these days are more troubled than ever. So Elliot, welcome back. Thank you for joining as a panelist. And again, using the chat, you'll see contact information for everybody. Also with us, Pat Sheridan. Pat's the interim president and CEO of INFRA, the Independent Natural Food Retailer Association. I think everybody knows it's a cooperative of independently owned natural food stores. INFRA has about 280 members, 17 associate retailers operating over 400 stores in nearly all 50 states, 45 states. But the thing that people don't often know about Pat and INFRA is it's close to 2 billion in sales, 1.8 billion. Pat joined in 2018, led particularly on the technology front to deliver all manner of improvements to INFRA's infrastructure. And also Pat is active outside. He's the secretary of the OTA's Retailer Council. So again, lots of experience in lots of different sectors, but Pat, thank you for joining us here. Your experience and insights in this critical customer for all of us is important. And then we also have Ben Nauman. Ben's an old friend and also a regular here. Ben is the Senior Director of Purchasing for National Co-op Grocers, NCG, which again is a cooperative for retail food co-ops located across the US, 147 member co-ops. And again, over 200 stores, 38 states, and combined annual sales of over $2 billion. So, you know, we're talking to $4 billion worth of retail here, everybody. Anybody who thinks of INFRA and NCG as these little tiny mom and pops has to get with the 21st century. Ben joined NCG back in 2004, has worked as the development director for co-ops in the Midwest, and then really worked, and I've worked extensively with Ben on developing category management programs there and overseeing really the largest expansion of NCG's purchasing initiative since the creation of the CAP program way back in my era. So Ben leads the category management team and of course is able to speak about multiple categories here. He has a whole team of buyers and analysts working for him. And the one thing I want to say before we turn it over to you, Pat, and for everybody is just to underscore why I wanted to have these two come speak with us. You know, we've obviously been hearing in our spring webinar series at our spring HEI and then in the series up till now, just the challenging times that retailers are facing. And of course, we as brands, you know, we have our challenges, but it's helpful, I think, to and important to see things on the other side. And, you know, whether it's traffic or just completely realigned preferences. Last week, John Raish got really into that, just the explosion of more breakfast offerings as people who might have gone out or grabbed something on their way to work are now, you know, home. They're not going anywhere. So resetting, reprioritizing with existing mixes is an enormous challenge for our retail partners as they just try to keep up with shifting demands, let alone bringing in all of the new innovation. And I personally know on this call today, out of the now almost 250 of us who are on, I know 30 or 40 brands here who sadly or tragically had their start. Last year was going to be your big start, right? Whether big start as in like literally starting or big start as in launching new innovation. And so it's been a traumatic time for both the sell side and the buy side, but I just think it's terribly important to hear in the trenches what's going on, what the retail perspective is, but particularly from these two. And the reason for that, I think, is self-evident, but let me just say it. If you are launching in the natural product space and you are not first heading into, see, my colleagues here or their colleagues, there's something wrong. I'm not saying that there isn't a place to launch in a large supermarket in your region, your backyard. Maybe start with some, you know, a handful of Publix or Stop and Shops or Safeways or whatever. But as I just said in the introduction, between these two, they're everywhere. And this is where your consumer is. And frankly, they want to hear from you. If you're just getting started, frankly, if you've come to see them after, I'm just going to say what they're going to say anyways. If you come to see them after, you're already launched at supermarkets, you're going to have a harder time. This is where the core customer is. It's where a discerning, values-driven consumer is. High indices with organic, with non-GMO, with fair trade, animal welfare, and so forth. And so, for me, it's just crucial that we get to hear from two leaders in this really critical space. So our format today, Pat's going to speak about perspectives from Infra, hand the mic over to Ben, and then Elliot and I will have Q&A and some discussion, and then we'll throw it open to yours. And as Carlene said, I'll just remind you one last time, please use the Q&A function. That's what Elliot and I will be watching for as we get your questions. So with that, Pat, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Elliot, also for being here as a moderator. Appreciate the opportunity. And Ben, as they say, we have to stop meeting like this, but actually I've enjoyed working closely with Ben. We actually work physically down the street from each other sometimes. So even though it's been a pandemic, we keep our virtual communication ties going and just look forward to the day where we can meet for a beer at the brewery right across the street from my office again. And I think Ben and I, although we tell a similar story, there are enough differences that it's always worth having us in that same conversation. Our members are structured differently. Our programs, while overlapping, are different. But one thing that remains consistent between the two of us really is product attributes and the products that our members sell at shelf. So this is a great opportunity, I think, for all of you to hear from both of us and hopefully get some answers to the pressing questions that you have right now. Gary did ask that we share a little about how things are going with the membership as a whole, and then talk a little about what we see on the horizon, and then how you might work with us. And also, I'll start with Infra. Everyone knows it's been an exhausting year. We're finishing up a year of pandemic, and we're going headlong into a year two. We've added to that the experience that many are having that might align more with our Minnesota winters, but your infrastructure is not handling it well. It brings challenges to our member stores in your communities too. So just to add insult to injury, as it were. So it was a challenging year for our retailers. It was challenging for all retailers, but the independents and the cooperatives all had to become frontline essential workers, had to worry about the safety of their employees and their customers. They had to sometimes become the enforcer of mask mandates, which goes against the grain of welcoming people into your store. They had to live through last March's run on pantry and essentials, and then take a deep breath and watch that travel through wellness and quite a few other areas. There was a run on natural products, frankly, and the data that we're seeing from SPINS actually shows that for the year. That's a good thing for products. It was a challenge for our stores for a while. It's evened out, but we continue to have ongoing supply chain challenges. And everybody's been talking about it. But I will say that most of us don't anticipate that's going to ease up in 2021 until maybe late in the year, or we'll go through periods of easing for certain categories. But our partners and our members all feel this experience and feel that it's going to continue for quite some time. So I think that brings some opportunity for brands, especially you brands that are early stage, because your products as a whole are hard to access and get on the shelf, but that leaves open shelves, and that hopefully leaves some opportunity. But despite all that, the industry and our members also have seen tremendous sales growth. And even the natural products industry has seen explosive growth in conventional stores, which is great for products, actually great for the mission of INFRA and their stores, challenging in that some bigger players in the market are taking product and getting occasionally prioritized in supply chain because of their volumes. But despite all that, INFRA members still outperformed in the natural channel. They actually, natural product sales at INFRA stores ran about 14.7% sales increase compared to the whole natural channel of stores, which was about 14%. So that's been exciting news for our members, despite the challenges that come with it. The sales data suggests that that's going to continue in 2021. December saw a big uptick again. And so we don't see that ending anytime soon. The new challenge is, how do we help our members get ready for what's next, right? And how can they capture or retain some of that customer base that they've captured during the pandemic after they come out the other side, as it were. INFRA as a whole did well in 2020. The vendor community supported us, and we're grateful for it. Sometimes vendors promoted when promoting seemed unimportant because product was flying off the shelf. But I would argue that it is important. This is probably a more important time to promote your product than any time before. And I think what we see is those vendors and brands that have decided to pull promotions are now starting to see shrinking shelf space and sometimes replacement from brands who are willing to be bold. And those are the folks that we're looking to partner with. One thing to think about for you early stage products is make sure you can scale your product manufacturing safely. Some of the brands that fell off, or the SKUs that fell off, were because pandemic production problems. So think about that as you're growing. Make sure your product can be made in a facility that actually can be made during a pandemic. I never thought I'd say those words, but here I am saying them. And then watch for where larger brands are reducing their SKU mix and where they may be abandoning existing shelf space, because that's an opportunity for you at the store level. Some of the trends we're seeing are, and Gary mentioned them, the explosion in breakfast. We're hearing a lot about meal kits, and I think that falls under still the great need to replace the restaurant experience at home. And that's where a lot of that money's going, and that's going into product that allows families as opposed to individuals to have convenience food. So the more families are preparing foods, and if you think your product fits into that mix, think about presenting them that way. I'll move on to working with INFRA, and Ben and I agreed that the best way to have this particular conversation was not to have our normal PowerPoint decks, because our world's not normal, and that was a great opportunity for me to step back and think about, how do vendor brands work with INFRA? And there's a traditional way, and the links are being shared, I think, in chat, and there will be a document available at the Hirschberg website too that kind of summarizes what I'm saying here. And that traditional path means going to our website, seeing our vendor opportunities brochure, which looks like this on paper, but you can also see it online. And then, filling out a form online and hoping to hear back from INFRA. I don't think that's the best way to get into INFRA stores. There are opportunities to do that if you're a more mature organization, but if you're in that early stage, I would go to the INFRA website, and the link will be provided to look at our member directory in your area and start calling on member stores. Go to the stores and be really prepared when you get an opportunity to meet with a buyer. So your brand story is important and it's powerful, but you're meeting with buyers who are extremely busy and really are looking for solutions that can be handled to them. So bring your brand story, because that passion is super important, but back it up with some real data. So I'll give you an example. If you have a unique or trend ingredient that provides documented benefits, it's showing growth trends in the industry, bring data that supports that. That tells a story to the buyer that not only is it a passionate story, but it's a passionate story that can convert to selling to customers on shelf. And that's important. Think about your attribute certifications. That was mentioned in the questionnaire, but INFRA members have a broad, the attribute requirements are different at every store, but they intersect in a few places. And we prioritize organic, non-GMO, regenerative ag, biodynamic, compostable and recyclable packaging, and ingredient transparency. So those are all things to think about. And if you're in those areas, think seriously about certification. And it looked like from the quick questions that went up that actually a lot of you are already there. You're either certified or you're on the path to certification, and that's really powerful. I would say when you go into store, make an offer to place your products that meets the buyer's needs. So don't focus on you'd like to get a shelf or you'd like to get 2 shelves. Instead, bring them something that's focused and powerful. You don't not necessarily want a huge SKU assortment, but rather focus on a few that'll be bigger sellers. That's going to be a benefit. That's going to be an opportunity to get on shelf, but it's also going to grow your ACV, which is important as you work toward distribution or delivering directly to INFRA members from a regional or national perspective. When you're ready, and many of you already have, so that's great news, get a broker. The brokers have direct relationships at INFRA. The brokers can guide you as to those next steps of growth. And they can really help manage your expectations too. I think if you like Gary said, if you have your eye set on going to a huge supermarket chain right off the bat, while we wish you luck, it's extraordinarily challenging, and it does make your products slightly less interesting to independents, because our goal is to differentiate with product. And then the last kind of piece of advice, market your product to the customer, the end user, the people who are going to be consuming your product. Work with individual stores. Some stores have a lot of social media, a lot of website presence, as opposed to going in and saying, I'd love to be a part of your Instagram post, provide them with an Instagram post. That makes it so much easier for them to actually put that out there when they've decided to test your product at shelf. And I guess finally, when I think about opportunities at INFRA, we do have these traditional promotional opportunities, but we have a new program that we're just rolling out, and I wanted to share it with this group. It's called Cultivate. We're very excited about it. It's in partnership with KeHE. It's rolling out this spring. It's a new program. We're starting a test region in the Southwest region out of KeHE's Chino and Stockton warehouses. The purpose is to work with innovative on-trend brands not yet in wide distribution and help you grow and provide unique opportunities to our membership. Particular focus is on product quality, like I was mentioning, and attributes. Central to the program is an upfront commitment from members to allow new placement auto ships. So this is a program that if you qualify as a brand, will get you on shelf and will get you promoted. So we think it's a wonderful opportunity, not only for our members, but for our brand partners. The program contact there is Andy Huth, and I think his email address is being shared right now. And Andy would love to hear from you if you have the opportunity to be in those warehouses or getting close. That's a program we're testing. With success, we intend to roll it out nationally.
And Pat, just to be clear, for those who didn't know, this is Southern California region is where you're starting.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. Thank you. And I guess that points to the fact that many may know, but may not. INFRA, we have a national primary supplier relationship with KE. And that's why we're starting the program there. That's what I have.
All right, super. Well, thank you. And amazingly, we allowed you to get through without interruption. That's the first time Elliot or I have ever done that. So you're not going to be quite so lucky probably, Ben, but the floor is yours.
I had already warned Ben.
Ben, you're muted. Do we have you unmuted? There we go. Thank you.
How's that? All good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Gary, and Elliot and Carlene for the opportunity. The chance to get involved with sessions like this, I really enjoy because I think it actually addresses what is one of our biggest problems at National Co-op Grocers, or NCG. Many brands, especially at the startup stage, have some familiarity with a co-op. One of our natural food co-op members, they may know the Wedge here in Minneapolis, or PCC Community Markets, or Briar Patch out in Grass Valley, or City Market in Burlington, Vermont. But what they don't understand is that behind all of those co-ops is this secondary co-op, this purchasing cooperative, NCG, that those entities created so that they could create for themselves many of the economies of scale that their chain competitors have. And it's actually in that spirit that NCG was formed as a purchasing cooperative. The initial charge for NCG when we were created in 1999 and then reimagined in 2004 was that we would provide for our members the benefits of being a chain while also maintaining the autonomy of an independent business. And so we oftentimes will go to market talking about ourselves as a virtual chain. And so NCG is very much like INFRA. We're a purchasing cooperative. I think the key difference between NCG and INFRA, aside from just NCG kind of had a bit of a head start, if you will, on getting up and running over INFRA, is that all of our members are community-owned food co-ops. They don't have a single owner, or the stores aren't owned by a couple of partners. The stores themselves are actually owned by some of the people who shop there. You don't have to be an owner to shop in a food co-op, but most of our co-ops have, somewhere in the neighborhood of, between 60 and 80% of their shoppers are also owners. And so, as I think Gary was saying a little bit earlier, this notion of the shoppers being really, or the consumers being really discerning, really values driven, I would say committed, so committed that they not only shop their grocery store, but they've made an investment in their grocery store. We also talk about the consumers in our stores as being really curious buyers. The food co-op shoppers tend to shop about 50% more providers to get their needs met than does a typical supermarket shopper. So they're willing to go out of their way and visit different outlets, farmers markets, participate in CSAs, that sort of thing, in order to get their overall needs met. So as Gary said, we're 147 co-ops, 200 stores, 39 states, but we've got a really big concentration of stores in New England, in the greater Twin Cities metro, where both Pat and I are based, and in the Pacific Northwest. And we're actually coming up on just a little hair shy of $2.5 billion in volume. So I think that if you combine NCG and INFRA here, that would make us, at least in the natural channel anyway, the second largest chain in the natural channel, second only to Whole Foods Markets. Our members range in size from about $1 million a year single store operator up to PCC Community Markets out in Seattle, which is a 15-store chain of cooperatives that will do about $400 million this year in annual sales. So a lot of different need sets that have to be met when you're working with groups that range in size in that way. As a purchasing cooperative, we're mostly in the business of pooling demand for goods and services, whether that's consumer demand or demand that grocery stores have, our community-owned stores have, and then seeking to develop B2B relationships with brands, distributors, service providers. Purchasing cooperative is still the major thrust and the economic engine of what NCG does, but we've actually evolved over the years to become so much more for our members. We have formed a subsidiary to support new store development and expansion. We've got a retail support team that functions very much like the regional coordinators and headquarters functions to support our members with continuous improvement, strengthening their merchandising, pricing strategies, that sort of thing. So there's a lot more going on than just the purchasing co-op side of our business. And we sometimes talk about what we refer to as our virtuous cycle. The purchasing cooperative creates the economics that support what we refer to as our retail support team or our regional support teams that go out and strengthen our members and help them to grow, which then makes them more attractive to brands, distributors, et cetera, and strengthens the opportunity that we have for the purchasing cooperative. And the thing just kind of repeats and repeats and has been key to our success. The relationships, our single most important, I would say, business relationship is the relationship that we have with United Natural Foods Incorporated. We have a primary wholesale agreement with them. We're actually UNFI's second largest customer on the natural side of things, the super value acquisition through their customer mix up just a little bit, but still today their second largest customer. And then more recently, we've added a secondary relationship for us with KeHE. That is also a national relationship. And we're really just getting the onboarding of our co-ops to KeHE service underway now. So it's still very much in development. We also work with payment processors because our co-ops need a better rate on credit card processing. The folks that supply floor mats and coffee cups and all manner of other things. But the most important relationships that we manage on behalf of the co-ops are really the relationships that we have with the brands. The reason that those relationships, I think, are the most important relationships is because it's the one area where the value chain really extends all the way from producer and grower all the way out to the consumer. And so there's just sort of this compounding value effect there through those relationships. We operate a number of programs. The one that best represents that value chain that I spoke to and what we refer to as our flagship program is our Co-op Deals Promotions program. It's a highly successful joint promotions and marketing program that has a number of different promotional elements. And most brands at some stage that do some business with even a number of co-ops at a region, maybe not even nationally, will want to find their way into our Co-op Deals Promotions program. More recently, we've added a soup to nuts category management program for our members, which evolved from and has swallowed up our new item program. So we've integrated our new item program in that. And the new item program represents a means by which a new or emerging brand or a brand with a line extension can get their products in front of many co-ops at one time by working with just a single NCG category manager or buyer, if you will. And the Corsets category management solution represents a means by which we can really strengthen the distribution of products in the portion of the assortment that is really common among all of our members. So that's relatively a new program for us. NCG continues to add new programs and we continue to evolve the programs that we have. The Corsets initiative that I mentioned is a very big priority for us this year. And we are also evolving our promotions program throughout this year, adding digital promotions in a number of ways that will extend the footprint of our co-op deals onto the smartphones and into the browsers of consumers. I'll talk just a little bit about how to work with us at a really high level, and then I'm hoping to move more quickly to the Q&A portion, because I think that's where the real gold ends up being in these sessions. But we operate as a category management shop, and so what that means is we have folks who act as a headquarters type buyer, and they are assigned a portfolio of categories that they are responsible for. And for the vast majority of brands, the early stage development or business development with NCG is actually not with NCG directly. And more often than not, it actually gets started with our member co-ops, where a brand will often work kind of out from their specific geography, wherever the brand itself is located. And that's really important. Sort of focusing on those that are close in is really important, because local is really important to a lot of our members. And so early on, I think you can get a lot of success, by focusing on the co-ops that are closest to you. And then what we typically see is, because all of our co-ops are connected, a brand will start with one co-op, and then the buyer at that particular co-op will share at one of our annual conferences or through some of the other events that we host, the success that they're having with that brand. And through networking type engagements, try and connect that brand up with another co-op. And we see a brand sort of move from a single co-op to a small group of co-ops. And then from there, one of the benefits of working with a small group of co-ops close in is that all of our members report into SPINS. We're actually the second largest key account reporting in the natural enhanced channel. And so when you get a little bit of success in a small area, other members in the outlying regions start to take notice of that in the SPINS data, and are looking, at what's really working in other areas of the country at any given point in time. And so opportunity then to scale up from maybe a store cluster to an entire UNFI distribution center, or potentially even an entire region. When it comes time to actually working with NCG, the vast majority of the brands will actually have their first contact these days with our business development manager, Heidi Troret, and I think we provided her contact information in the chat here. Heidi is her position has two areas of focus right now. One is beginning to develop a supplier diversity program for NCG, but the more mature part of her work is really helping emerging brands to navigate our systems, our processes, and help them determine which of our programs are the best fit for them. From there, after a brand has done a little bit of work with Heidi to get up to speed and sort of is oriented to NCG, what we see is that most of the brands will move on to begin working with an NCG category manager, again, which functions like a headquarters buyer for the chain. And then the brands will typically, begin working with the category manager to develop a strategy for retail distribution, develop a promotional strategy, potentially even work on kind of an everyday pricing strategy for the product, that sort of thing. Pivot here and talk just a little bit about what's happening in our business. Much of 2020 was a period of adaptation for our members. Many of the things that I think we heard Gary say earlier, or Pat speak to with respect to adapting to the pandemic environment was true for NCG members as well. I'd say the biggest area of adaptation is the reality that prior to this year, I think the stat is that something like as much as 60% of food spending was outside of the home, and with the pandemic, so much of that moved into food at home, into grocery stores. And so we saw this sudden elevation of demand starting back with this surge in March, and that let off a little bit in the subsequent months, but the demand has stayed at sustained levels throughout the course of most of 2020 and even carrying well into early 2021 here. And so we've got that elevated demand. the challenge of maintaining safe distances with more traffic, more shoppers visiting stores in general, the challenge of keeping the frontline staff safe and healthy as essential workers, or we like to think of them as heroes. And, kind of all of that creates a whole lot of strain on the system. Add to that the challenge of adapting to new means of fulfillment. Many of our members thought of themselves as strictly bricks and mortar retailers prior to the pandemic. And now, it's become table stakes to have curbside delivery or, buy online, pick up in store, something along those lines. And so they've had to develop systems, processes, partnerships to be able to fulfill through new means. And then the volatility in supply we saw throughout the course of this last year, as many of the brands I'm sure on this call experienced too, the challenge of keeping up with that elevated demand. We have huge appreciation at NCG for those who worked throughout the course of this last year to increase your throughput and to rationalize the assortment, really kind of look at trimming those unperforming SKUs. We're actually at a place now where I think our service levels with UNFI are running very near 85% for the last 5-6 weeks here, which is just phenomenal in the face of what we've seen for most of the last 10-11 months. From a financial standpoint, what's been happening in our business is our CEO likes to refer to this as a tale of two stores. And what he means by that is that the center store, kind of that which represents traditional food at home, shelf-stable grocery products, frozen, refrigerated, chill, even in some cases, some of the wellness supplements categories have done very well. Very strong increased demand, the sorts of numbers that I think Pat shared earlier for the natural channel and for Infra, our numbers are right in line for those in the center store. However, the two highest margin areas of the store, deli bakery and wellness, have been really hard hit, and for different reasons. Of course, deli bakery, I think a bit more reduced traffic, larger baskets, and our deli bakery programming wasn't set up so much to provide dinner for an entire family at home as it was, a wrap or a sandwich or a salad at the salad bar, or a meal at the hot bar, that sort of thing. And then wellness, we've had a couple of challenges, long purchase cycles for wellness products, and the reality that so many of those products are readily available online is a bit of a challenge for us. And we're also comping against what we refer to as peak CBD. Many of our members were very early adopters of ingestible CBD. And as that business has experienced a little bit of a gold rush of its own, and more brands and more retailers have gotten into this space, it's difficult to comp against those numbers. And so,
Ben, while you're on this topic too, a couple of questions coming in really right around bulk foods. And I thought just be a good time to kind of share what you see, obviously big impact and what's going to happen, what the plans are.
Yep. Great. I'll take a look at the chat here in just a second. With respect to bulk food specifically, we are down, overall, down between 20 and 30% actually for the year, though I think we're going to start to see a little bit of recovery with bulk foods. And an awful lot of the deficit there is related to the reality that very early on in the pandemic, we did not understand, and I think even health officials didn't understand the extent to which the spread was likely to be airborne versus contact surfaces. Mm-hmm. And so self-serve bulk departments, were definitely not perceived as being safe. And consumers, were not responding well to self-serve bulk departments. Many of our members shut down their self-serve bulk departments, pivoted to packaged bulk items for a period of time. We're seeing more of our members turn their attention back to self-serve bulk departments again, though they may not operate with scoop bins in the same way that they are before. And we are seeing some recovery in the sales there, but it's going to take a little bit of time, given the long periods of time that a number of our members operated without bulk departments altogether. So, just to kind of wrap up this portion and talk a little bit about what's ahead for us, still for, I think, NCG members generally, strong tailwinds for food at home, center store, and some challenges, for us to figure out how best to adapt, what had been self-serve salad bars, hot bars, that sort of thing, and recover some of the sales that we have lost in the time since. But generally speaking, our members, we haven't lost members or lost locations during this very challenging period. In fact, we see many of our members really thriving, and a number of our members who had plans for expansion going into the pandemic have been able to carry out their plans for expansion and will continue to expand in the coming months here. With respect to challenges, one of the biggest challenges we have today that I think is a we challenge, meaning not just NCG and Infra as retailers, but also all of the brands, is related to innovation. And, we've got a situation in which buyers aren't taking meetings in store, no Expo East, no Expo West in the same way. Regional distributor shows not happening in the same way. All of those things, that were, key opportunities, I think, for many brands to present retailers with new products have not quite evaporated, but, darn close. And so finding a way to get through to the buyer, I think, is more challenging than ever before. And then the reality that the buyers themselves, because they're managing this elevated level of demand at retail, they're having a harder time keeping up than ever before. And the volatility in supply they experienced throughout the course of 2020 meant that they were, trying to figure out which brand of toilet paper they'd be selling next week, and whose flour might be on the shelves, the week after that, as, everyone was baking their feelings for months and months. Mm-hmm. And so the buyers are just starved for time. And NCG, because of our focus on the efficient portion of the assortment with the core sets program this last year, is also in some ways not making it as easy, I think, as many might want to get in front of our retail buyers. And so I was really heartened to see in the polling earlier how many folks said they do have a broker today. And I think, at this point in time, it's incredibly important to have a really good broker. I think the value that the broker adds is they really know the retail buyers. They really know what's happening out there in the field and on the street, and figuring out how to cut through all the noise and get to that retail buyer at that specific store. That individual is, I believe, never been more important to you. A couple of other things in that space. I think this is a period of time to be focused on velocity or sales per point of distribution first, and distribution second. And what I mean by that is better to be selling really well in a limited number of stores, and be successful there, than to spread your focus and attention across a large number of stores and have a difficult time servicing the product in the way that it needs to be serviced and supported by each company out there that has products on our member shelves. So the notion of kind of starting with a co-op in your area and then adding a couple of additional co-ops, that sort of thing, I think is incredibly important. With our core set program, we do have new item reviews this year. So it is possible to present new items to NCG category managers this year. But I would say in general, our category managers are really, again, a bit more focused on kind of getting the core assortment right in this first year of this new program for us. As I said earlier, we're one of the largest key accounts reporting to spins. So you can subscribe and see, down to the individual member, and location, all of your products out there, and see where there are both sales and distribution opportunities for your brands if you've started to work with NCG. And Spins also can help point you in the direction of the co-op in your region that might represent the next biggest opportunity for you to pursue. As Pat said, I think a couple of other things that are key in the space of this challenge related to innovation, being really clear about the value proposition. I think, Pat talked about that a little bit differently, but coming in and talking or having your broker talk about what it is that makes you unique and special, your product unique and special. Pleased to hear there's a component on storytelling here. I think that's absolutely essential. This is a really challenging time, I think, to be a Me Too product unless your competition is stumbling with supply. If you don't have, clear points of distinction, the likelihood that you're going to get much focus or attention from the buyer is not great. And I'll just maybe close up my remarks here real quick by mentioning a couple of things that I think are really helpful in breaking through the noise, both with NCG category managers and with retail buyers. The first of those is affordability. In the space of this K-shaped recovery, as Pat said, natural products have done very well through the pandemic. And there are an awful lot of folks out there like myself, and I assume, probably Gary and Pat, who are gainfully employed and, probably are not able to spend money on entertainment and dining out and some of those other things. And so the supermarket may be one of the few places we can actually treat ourselves. So that's a real plus, but there's an awful lot of other folks out there who are having a difficult time stretching their food budget. And so the brands that are making pricing investments, whether that's promotional or everyday pricing investments with us, they are gaining share at a faster rate than the other brands, right in line with what Pat was saying about the importance of promotions. The other thing that I think really matters to us right now is supplier diversity. We're in the midst of launching a supplier diversity program. So if there is a story to be told about the ownership of your brand, if you fall into one of the more traditional supplier diversity ownership groups, veteran-owned businesses, LGBTQIA-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, Black, Indigenous, and person of color owned businesses, that's important for us to know right now. There's a lot of consumer interest, especially at food co-ops for that. And then the last thing that I would mention that I think Pat gave voice to too is just focus on regenerative agriculture, focus on plastics reduction and packaging in particular. And then there are a host of new and emergent certifications out there. And I would say food co-op shoppers and food co-op buyers, and I'm sure this is true for Infra too, really like to be on the forefront, the sort of bleeding edge of what's next in the food space and how we can sort of take food justice to an altogether different and sustainability to an altogether different level. And so some of the emergent certifications, the regenerative, organic, that sort of thing, I think that does really help cut through the noise. So I'll stop there and hopefully we can get into the Q&A as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, and we have excellent questions, and Elliot is going to lead us off in just a moment as we drill into in some cases, some very precise questions for you both. But I have a big picture one for you both. You've there's a nice, no surprise here, symmetry or synchronicity in your remarks, and I'll do some summarizing at the end. But you've both underscored the pressures that I mentioned in the introduction, and also talked. Each of you in different ways talked about, be sure you've really got your act together supply-wise. Like you guys have been traumatized. I mean, I don't think that's an overstatement in a year where a lot of suppliers were just not ready for this. But I'm wondering right now, as maybe you'll have different answers from each of your perspectives, are there big category opportunities are there big holes where you are desperate for some solutions? And I'm not asking about the value sets, because you both spoke to those, you know, diversity and sustainability. I'm asking actual segments. Are there places where you need help?
So a product segment where we might actually need some help.
Yeah.
You know, I think this may have come up in another conversation. A couple of things that come to mind, and it's a challenging thing because we tend to have undersized frozen sections, but I think family sized, you know, and value sized everything, you know, that's not really, you know, the industry had kind of been wired for convenience,
yeah,
and for single serve and for everything on the go. And so it's challenging, you know, we would ordinarily, I think, meet those needs through our deli departments, but in, you know, many ways, we just had to scale back our prepared foods operations altogether very quickly. And so rebuilding is difficult. So that's one area that comes to mind. Let me think a little bit more on that.
Yeah, yeah. Any thoughts, Pat?
Yeah, you know, there's some similarities, but along the same lines. I think meal solutions as kind of an umbrella is an area where there's a gap, and a lot of times that certainly hits local, but if there's the ability to present something that goes regional or national, I think it'd be well received.
Yeah, I thought also the way you worded that earlier is worth people hearing and noting. You said if you believe these are my words, but if you believe your products can be perceived that way, can be seen that way, that's a very valuable little cue. To you know, maybe we often think that we're selling an item, but how many of us are actually selling a meal, or an in-between meal, or a kid's meal? And that I think something people should note. So Elliot, you've got a bunch of questions on your.
Yeah, and Gary, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and collapse questions into broader questions because we won't get through them all. And in typical entrepreneurial fashion, I've got people texting me thinking they're hacking their way around the Q&A queue, so not going to work. But one that just kind of was thematic across the board was really around these smaller emerging brands. And we talked a little bit about the challenges right now of getting buyer attention, getting on the shelf. But what about getting off the shelf? And you know, what's being done in terms of ramping up the opportunities for digital collaboration and other ways to drive discovery and trial?
Well, we just like we were old school bricks and mortar before, and have had to adapt to omni-channel at retail. We are doing the same thing in terms of consumer engagement. And so I think I referenced earlier, we're launching digital promotions as part of our co-op deals promotions throughout the course of this year.
And one of the questions that followed that, Ben, is you have to be at a certain ACV or certain penetration within NCG to have access to that. I mean, where does that start playing? Does it have to be through category management?
Sure, yeah. So our most effective promotional vehicles, for example, feature in our flyer, our whether it's digital or the print flyer, that actually requires a pretty high threshold of ACV. And you know, the reason for that is obvious, right? You don't want to put an invitation out there to a party and then not have people show up at the store, or have people show up at the store and not find that product there. That's not good for the brand. That's not good for the consumer or for the store. But we have other promotional vehicles that do permit brands that have relatively low placement to participate in our programs, whether that's our feature shelf only promotions. We offer a TPR. You know, there's a host of other options there that are sort of designed to address that need state.
And to both of you, just again following that thread, because this was kind of pretty emblematic of a lot of the questions. Just in general, best practices, suggestions for these early stage brands that are successful, because to Gary's point, you know, you both represent where so many of these young brands start. And you know, the traditional demo, founder demo, that all that kind of stuff is not available. Any lessons learned, best practice, things that you can share that that you've seen other brands do well in driving, you know, that initial velocity and that initial awareness?
Well, I'll just jump in again and say, I think when we were talking in maybe April or May of last year, this sort of thing that we're doing together right now wasn't really as commonplace as it is today. But I know, you know, a good number of our retail buyers who are taking meetings, you know, via Zoom with, you know, brokers and brands on a regular basis, and just having, you know, them send samples in, you know, in advance of that. We actually fairly regularly are hosting virtual, you know, tastings and, you know, that sort of thing with members of our team to try new products right now. So I think, you know, this is possible, you know, with the retail buyers, but I think, you know, the appetite, you know, for that sort of thing and how common it is something that the broker is probably best going to understand for each specific retail outlet.
Yeah, and I love the pun of appetite. Nicely worked in there, Ben.
By the way, can I just quickly throw in Michael Cantor, who all of us know from Cambridge Naturals, just backed you both up. He threw in a comment, which I'll just essentially the critical importance of brokers right now and their value, that you know, they're having a hard time keeping up with seeing people, and for you know, brokers just know a whole lot more and can translate that for folks. So good hint from all of you.
Yeah, and I think that's great too. I would add, I kind of circle back to what I mentioned as a tip in providing social media plan already put in place that a retailer can use. And add to that some digital marketing solution, because these independent stores are, buyers are overwhelmed, but so are their marketing folks, right? So sort of give that sort of as a gift, I would say, is going to allow them to get out there to the end purchaser. I think the other possibility, and it fits with social media again, if you can, some brands are out there getting some social media influencers, basically placing their product in their following, and that results in getting identified a little bit faster, I believe.
And I think Ben was alluding to this, but one thing just to comment on my own question, that we've seen success is engaging the team at the stores. You know, making sure the teams get sampled and get recognized as being frontline workers and thanked, and you know, it's a pretty loyal following you can build at store level, and they're shoppers in their own stores typically. So don't forget that. Gary, can I just keep ripping off these questions?
Keep going. Yeah, there's a ton of them. Keep going.
Yeah, there are a ton. One of the questions here is just around working with distribution. You know, KeHE for you, Pat, Unify for you, Ben. But a few questions are: do you have to do that at the onset? What about direct relationships, you know, when you're first getting going? Kind of what's that break point? What's the coaching you recommend? Because it's a challenge for some of these smaller brands, you know, when they don't have distribution density to be able to make that jump.
Yeah. Our members work with a lot of direct brands, you know, in some areas of the store more than others. Our members really actually give preference to local brands. And that represents, in most cases, a commitment to, you know, a direct relationship, as inefficient, you know, and challenging as it can be, you know, from time to time. Those are, you know, the relationships that they're oftentimes, you know, going out of their way to make space for on the shelf. And so we do have the ability, our members have the ability to do business direct. NCG also has the ability to secure UNFI distribution for products. Of course, we've got to have demand. You know, we've got to make sure that product moves through the slot. But UNFI, you know, for our new item program, I think the stat was that they had slotted something like 91% of the items we presented to them.
Yeah, and I think it's a very similar story. I would say we have members who are working literally with hundreds of direct vendors, whether they be local or regional, or some of them national. Usually if they hit that level, then they're working with INFRA, and we have several direct relationships at INFRA.
Another question, unrelated, but just directly to you, Pat, is does Infra have a plan of doing kind of core sets similar to what NCG is doing?
NCG wins on that one a little bit. They're a little bit ahead of us. We are working with our distribution partner to solidify our approved product list. That our relationship started a little over a year ago with KE, and it's maturing, and our goal is to get there. Yes, it's not there today though.
You both made points in your remarks to this effect, and that's around when you go to the buyer, not to be a me too. Make sure, yes, I think Pat, you said specifically, it's fine to tell your brand story, but bring some data. The questions that are coming on is, what does a buyer really need to know? What do they need to understand? And, my coaching is around that you've got to show some category growth that's accretive. But what do you suggest to those on this in terms of, what they should bring to make a compelling case to the buyers at their meeting? And either one of you can jump in.
Go ahead, Pat.
And you referenced what I said. I think really, if you take all of these components together, and some of this is timing, right? if the need is strong the day you happen to be meeting, that's gonna make it easier to get there. But I think if you take all of the components of a brand story, the right attributes, the willingness to fit space needs in the store, right? I mean, the buyer might have a category, bringing creativity where your product might normally be seen in one location in a store. Come up with creative ideas why it might be sitting over in refrigerated when it's not refrigerated. I think those give a compelling story and give a buyer an opportunity to say, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And that can often turn into a placement where there wasn't the kind of shelf space that they thought was available.
Yeah, one of our former category managers does some sales and brand management work now under Kate LeBross Consulting, and I love the way that she talks about it. She talks about getting in touch with your why. What is your brand's reason for being, and that needs to be front and center. And I think not just understanding your why, and again, what makes you unique and different, but then especially if you're starting at the local level with a co-op or a handful of co-ops, visit the area of the store you expect to make your home. What else is there? I would never advise anyone to go in and trash their competition, so to speak, but at least come into an engagement with a buyer with an understanding, of what you're going to contribute, to their ability to serve as a provider to their community that just isn't present, on the shelf right now. And I think, that notion that what you have to offer is incremental, and will help grow the category sales instead of just taking share, from some other brand, that's worth the buyer's attention. That's worth taking the time to make a shelf tag for you, and slide over, some other item and make a little space for you on the shelf.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Oh, no, I was just going to comment on one of the questions. Well, first of all, obviously next week's story, that's why we're doing the whole thing with storytelling and discovery. But one of the questions that came in the tags on the end of that is from someone who said, you both have access to insightful data that you obviously use for your members. Are there programs or services that are going to be put in place where those data can be used with emerging brands to better plan and map? In other words, mapping end user demands or particular stores' interests or yourselves as sort of category managers?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We often, especially in working with some of the early stage brands, one of the things that we will oftentimes get asked is, oh, this all sounds great. What you guys do at NCG, do you charge, for what you guys do? And of course, my answer is not enough. And then after, that, what I'm usually interested in talking about is how we can provide them with BI, with business insights from, you know, the data that we sit over that help them take the investments that they make in our programs and get the maximum ROI for them. And so Gary, you and I will have an engagement this week, you know, on that front for one of the brands that I think you work with, and our category managers do that same sort of thing. They love to help, you know, a brand sort of figure out where should it point itself, you know, and which investments are the investments that, you know, make most sense, you know, and they want to see that brand, you know, grow with us, you know, over some period of time. So we use that data a lot in that sort of work. So much so actually that in our SPINS relationship, you know, we created a carve out that allows us to share it, you know, sort of free of charge if we decide, you know, that we're really interested in sort of helping in the incubation stage with the brand.
Yeah, you know, we're very aligned in that, and we do have powerful data, and we, I would say between the two of us, we have data. There's so much of it, we haven't really corralled it, but we both work and talk and actually share insights on data. Actually sharing the direct data is obviously something we can't do, but it does drive the conversations that our category leads have with brands. There's no doubt about it, because like Ben said, our goal is to make you successful, right? As long as your product fits what our member stores want to sell, that's our whole goal, right? Yeah. We want new product and we want growth.
Well, Elliot, I'm going to just take one more. I know I interrupted you, but because there's a question with a little bit of an edge here that I think somebody's kind of calling out, and it'd be interesting to hear both your reactions. I'll just read it. With the predatory financial behavior and subsequent suppression of innovation in small vendors, and this person's talking primarily about distributors. Will you be considering opening up your distribution practices to allow us to get in without using KeHE or UNFI? And or, I'm going to add the or, will you bring pressure to bear on those distributors to reform their practices? So the question that sort of tags on both your last comments is, you know, how far are you willing or able to go to help somebody who just isn't able to get the distributors' support at this? You know, they're both great partners, but they have their problems too, right? Sure. UNFI and KeHE. So curious how you both react to that.
Well, I'll say that they are great partners, both of them actually. And, but not every product belongs in big distribution. And that's just a reality. If every product grew to that point, then it would make perfect sense. So there's some, and it's not necessarily a set of criteria to the person who wrote the question. It could be that particular experience. And I think, you know, hearing what we said about how do you build your brand at the store level, and then look at a region level, or get enough traction that it gets the attention of NCG and INFRA. And there is a point, like Ben brought up, we also have similar new product offerings and other offerings that for promotion that aren't at that high ACV level.
And I'm going to follow up on a question on that in particular. When you are in that early stage and that direct stage with one of your retailer members, you know, how do you manage that relationship, make sure the product gets reordered, stays on shelf, you know, all of those kind of things? Because a lot of people are fearful of you know, working hard to get the yes, but then, you know, without the mechanics of the big distribution and the way it all works, that it doesn't last, it doesn't stick.
Ben, you want to start on this one?
Well, I'm struggling a little bit with making sure I really understand the question. So
if you're doing direct, the question really is, if you're able to go direct, how do you make sure that you stay on shelf? I mean, is that telemarketing? Is that, you know, getting in the stores? What does it take?
Yeah, really, I think it depends on what you mean by direct. We work with a lot of direct brands that, also have a broker, and work with a broker who's in the store, fairly frequently and, spending time at the shop. And we work with a lot of direct brands who work with smaller, more boutique style brokers, if you will, that give them a really high level of touch and representation,
Yep.
out there. And I think, the brand, the folks responsible for managing the brand cannot be in all the places a broker, can be. And so, I think that's, again, why that relationship is such an important one. And I think, they're so useful, especially at that stage. And, the importance of developing relationships with each of those retail buyers, and then your buyer changes, and I've never met a buyer who didn't know exactly what every consumer wanted, didn't need any data, or one that didn't have all sorts of idiosyncrasies they brought to it. And I think the brokers, that is the value that they add, is they can help you manage that piece. That said, some brands, especially at the local level, are fortunate enough to be able to maintain a really direct relationship with the buyer. That becomes more challenging with scale. And I think, to Gary's earlier question, I appreciate entirely the sentiment that comes with talking about the distributors as predatory, at that stage. And yet I would just, encourage folks to, with time, think about it as sort of a necessary evil, if it has to be evil at all. Because I think you hit this point where there's a chicken egg thing there with the distributor, right? I can't achieve the next level of scale, unless I'm willing to do business with these folks. And so NCG or Infra might help get me placed at UNFI or KHE, but if I want to grow beyond, NCG or Infra stores, I'm probably going to have to participate in some of John Reich's programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben answered it, so I don't really have anything to add.
Yeah, no, and I think the point you just made is to editorialize for a second, is the most critical. Direct can work for a small, for a small footprint for a small amount of time, but if you're really building a brand to scale, it's a brand that has to work in the ecosystem that includes broadline distribution, and you're going to have to figure that out at some point, in my opinion. Again, collapsing a few questions, it's really about the future of small brands in this post-pandemic, situation, with SKU rationalization, with e-com, with everything that's going on. I'd love to get both of your perspectives on, what is the future of these small emerging brands, not only in particular in your stores, but just in your mind and opinion generally.
Well, I guess I would say for us, they're incredibly important. And I think someone asked a question, in the chat there, is there a place for, small brands, that sort of thing. And, as the space becomes increasingly competitive, I think Pat spoke to this in his introductory remarks, growth of, in the last couple of years, we've seen growth of natural products greater in the mass and conventional channel than we have seen, by dollars anyway, than we've seen in the traditional natural channel. And so, I think we think of, aside from all of the great things that we have to offer communities in general, I think we think of ourselves as being really well positioned, to kind of continue to feed, the Krogers and the Safeways of the world, the brands of tomorrow, and where food is headed, that sort of thing. Like I said, our buyers like to be on the, sort of bleeding edge of innovation in this space and want to be part of, the transformation of food in general. So, I think it's absolutely critical for us, and it's unfortunate for us with our Co+Op program, that we finally gained the traction that we needed with that program at, just the wrong inflection point, for food innovation.
Yeah, I would add to that, and agree with everything Ben said. I would add to that too, the American consumer is hungry for brands that are making an impact, both locally and globally. And that's all of you brands, right? And we need a constant flow of that, because as Ben pointed out, that growth of the natural channel in conventional supermarkets is wonderful for the overall mission, but it creates product that's priced to where independents can't compete, right? Especially if they're in the same neighborhood. So that the differentiator is so important for independents to stay alive in the future.
Hey, two questions. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to try to also consolidate two questions that you probably can't answer, but I wonder if you have advice. One is asking, is there a list of brokers that you recommend? But the other is a little bit more drilled in. For smaller brands, how do they identify brokers who have solid relationships with you all that also are more properly scaled? Is there, get some guidance here?
Yeah, the first thing go ahead, Pat.
Well, we're probably going to say the same thing, but I was going to say the first thing you should do is talk to other brands, right? And it's harder. Ben pointed out, we don't have Expo East and West. We don't have live shows. So that makes it harder, but use your network to get recommendations. INFRA doesn't have a list of preferred brokers. If you get the opportunity to speak to a buyer at a store or to an INFRA category lead, they can ask you questions and find out what you're looking for in a broker and make some introductions.
We love them all the same. Certainly there are a couple of that, maybe stand out as kind of being premier in the natural product space. Natural specialty sales, and Presence Dynamic Presence are, kind of the two big ones. But really, we have very strong and important relationships with, smaller boutique brokers that only function in a certain region, and maybe that only function with a certain area of the store too. So it really depends on what your products are. And I would say, if you can get, the engagement with a retail buyer, just any retail buyer, maybe the first one you have the opportunity to interact with, and local helps, again, because our members place a lot of emphasis on local, I would ask them. I would actually ask the retail buyer, which brokers do you interact with that provide you with the best service and the best support for the products, that they're responsible for.
Yeah, good answer.
And Gary, I just two related things to that. One is that on UNFI's site, they do have a broker list. It's not preferred. It's just a list of brokers that they do work with. And also, I know Carlene put our contact information. If anyone wants information, we have some data too, so feel free to reach out. Okay.
We have an excellent Hawaiian broker online today. Right. So. Listen, this is another small company question. Just might be helpful to regarding the host of this. Basically, they want to try to save money regarding the host of new certifications. You both said the certifications are meaningful. Does a brand with an accountable story working in the community count? Certifications add costs, and I'm presuming your answer will be what you already said, which is tell your story. That the story trumps the certification supports, but the story trumps, right? Is that?
It does, but it doesn't scale. Right? I mean, I think that's the tricky part is that, right. As you grow, those certifications become more important because, what do they say? Like 3.2 seconds, is about how much time the consumer is engaging with that product, at the shelf. And so those certifications, represent trust, some consistency with other products. I know, what some of that means. And so we're struggling right now with direct trade, which is showing up a whole lot. It's kind of like local, at scale, but what does it really mean? Fair trade, at least a good lot of our shoppers, know what that means. But direct trade is basically saying I have a direct relationship and there's a unique story behind every one of these products. 3.2 seconds is not a lot of time.
Fair point. Elliot, do you have a last question that you want to prioritize here?
No, Gary, I think we've covered most of them. I think the general question is just how best to engage, which you guys have answered. We've talked, going through the brokers, going to the stores first and so forth. But I think that the real fear that throughout these questions here is just how do these smaller brands stay viable and stay important moving forward in both INFRA and NCG stores. So any parting advice there?
Yeah, and I'll support I'll add to that question so you guys can both offer your last comments. With one, somebody was asking about the importance of promoting, which you both have emphasized. And the question really is, how has the pandemic impacted promotion execution, post-execution audits? And how should brands be thinking about, what should their expectations be going forward? And maybe that's a place where you can each, you know, since promotion is so key, value is so key, innovation, except in the sort of family pack size, is a little bit harder. Any parting words of advice?
Yeah, I want to address the first part related to the small brands piece, and just say I think our fates are linked. You know, at some level, we are for the reason you said you invited us, Gary. We are the David, and the Goliath of the sort of supermarket retailing food system here, and so we probably have a lot more in common in terms of how we think about what matters to us with many of those same brands than maybe you might have in common with a Safeway or an Albertsons at the end of the day. Great merchants. On the promotional front, I think what Pat said earlier is key. We thought, we heard from a lot of brands very early in the pandemic that said, look, at elevated levels of demand, there's no real reason for me, to continue to promote at this level. And so they pulled back their promotions. Wrong strategy. Food at home became really popular, and cutting through the noise and offering affordability and great value. When people are looking at that that line of their household budget, the grocery line of the household budget ballooning. Wrong strategy for a brand. So it's just absolutely essential. And again, as we dig into the data, the brands that are making either everyday or promotional pricing investments are those that are gaining share.
And I'll just share with my own personal anecdote as a person who gets access to a lot of product. During this pandemic, I've found new brands through promotion untold times, and I'm sticking with those brands.
Yeah. So interesting that you say that. I will say, as Ben knows, I have my co-op in Concord, New Hampshire is our go-to. And just today, I had the same exact thing. I discovered 3 brands because they were on promotion that I would not have seen.
That's right.
And I think that's a really important place to wrap. And the way we like to wrap is I want to try to summarize key points. And I'd ask you, Elliot, if I miss any, to pound away here. But both of you, you're both up significantly. Obviously, some categories better than others. The bulk is playing catch up. You've both talked about it's more important to promote now than ever, to that last point, and that there are certain categories now that are just really eating at home categories, value categories, family pack categories, really desired. You've got to tell your story. I mean, this is a perfect setup for next week. I thought the point that, velocity, focus on that. And by the way, as the series goes on, we are going to move into the investment side of things in the last couple of sessions. And the investors are saying the exact same thing you retailers are saying. They're much more interested in seeing performance. And Elliot, led a seminar 2 weeks ago on capital efficiency and effectiveness. I mean, that's where it's at. So I just think that we really have to drive that home. Prioritizing certifications is a way to tell your stories, but as you said, telling your story comes first. Focus on a few winners as opposed to big display. You guys have appreciated SKU rationalizing. You could not have said it more eloquently. It's really an advantage to use brokers. So find a way to do that. You're both looking for social and digital solutions. So if you're a brand and you've got some unusual digital capacity or capabilities or ideas, and to those if you're a service provider in this space, these 2 large retailers, I don't think of you as Davids anymore. You're Goliaths to me. But anyhow, you're both calling for help. You've both got some great new programs. I don't at this moment can't go into it, but the Cultivate program in partnership with KE, starting in Southern California, to work with small brands, and the core sets and category management programs at NCG are, you know, clearly orienting yourselves to these earlier stage brands, which is, you know, really critical contributions to the ecosystem. Gosh, I mean, so many more, but I think those are the.
Yeah, and Gary, the only other one that I would say that's really important, and I think it was towards the end that you both said that, you know, that you're inextricably linked to these emerging brands, and, you know, yes, working together in concert to succeed and change this industry is paramount. And, you know, I think we're fortunate. We're fortunate to have, you know, retailers like your members, and we're fortunate to have brands like the founders that we do, and everybody's really ultimately after the same goal. And if we can think that way and work together, there's real opportunity. So
yeah, yeah. And I do want to underscore too, because I know you both, Ben, you said this, but I know both of you are really interested in supplier diversity now, really taking this seriously. Food justice and sustainability, critical to our customers, critical to our industry, critical to our planet. So thank you for that. Before I let you all go, Carlene, if you can just flash up the screen here. I just want to remind everybody, we welcome your advice and input, but here are the upcoming webinars, as has been mentioned, and Ben and Pat and Elliot set us up for telling your story and gaining discovery. That should be a good one. We have a couple of brands that are launching in the current marketplace, Nixie and Uncle Matt's, who will be talking about their COVID stories, and both guys are nodding. They've seen these guys out there. We'll do consumer and market insights and trends, and then we'll get into some finance, and then navigating Costco, and also Thrive Market, two alternative channels that are also deserve some of our attention. Last slide, thank you, Carlene. So again, please send us your feedback. I remind everybody, this session has been recorded. There was an awful lot of valuable links and context in the chat. So I know it's like fire hose, drinking from a fire hose here, but you know, the recording will be up tomorrow. Go ahead through, share it, network, lots of good offers, lots of good help. And honestly, you guys, we always say this, we could do this for 3 hours, but thank you for your candor. Thank you for your clarity, and thank you for your pragmatism. This is, you know, you said it, you each said it, you know, we're in an ecosystem together. We need each other, and you're giving yourselves, giving of yourselves today. Your time and advice is going to help you, but it's going to help us all. So thank you again so very much. And Elliot, as ever, thank you. And
thanks for the
opportunity. We'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Stay warm, stay safe.
Bye all.
Bye.